sense sphere. You must listen to our demands.
Well, hello again. It felt like Sunday yesterday. Now it is Sunday, and I understand there may have been an England match. I was up and downstairs. I haven't heard anyone screaming, so I dare say we've got a problem. So welcome again. Oh my God, there's so much still to talk about, isn't there? Do you know what? It was an interesting Saturday, although we had Disparu on and everything, but no more fear and trepidation on a Saturday. Eh? No more worrying about how the program might be getting attacked by the actual episode. I mean, I can feel that. You know, had a great stream last night with Disparu. Check it out, please, if you didn't watch it. Everyone was on top form. It was a real good laugh, and it was, a good debate, actually. Unlike possibly RTD, who was presented a strange season and a strange doctor, really, to say the least, and has offered strange interviews and strategies to explain, as we have limped through the season, the ratings falling and all the rest of it. We will look at that in the ratings watcher. But the main topic tonight is RTD. He's launched Doctor Who twice. One seemed to be deemed successful, and this one, no way. Why the change? What's happened? So in a deep dive into the 9th Doctor season, I probably will show you some troublesome links to the present and to show you where some of the problems did actually start. So I need my friends on. So I hope they've slept. But here's Rachael. Hello.
Hi. Hello. Bow, everyone. Bow. Queen of Woke is here.
That's it. She's back again.
Yeah.
She's probably been streaming. No.
I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, Gary, as well. Good to see you.
I'm feeling I think I realized why I'm feeling kind of off. It's because there was no Doctor Who this weekend.
Well, there's nothing to chew the cud over. However, you also can feel good that it hasn't been attacked. So that was our show yesterday, everybody. If you missed it, where the hell were you? Apart from I did put one advert out saying it would be tonight because I'm a madman. And of course, can I just advertise now? It was Gary's idea, but RTD is in the hot seat. We're going to have a show soon. So get your emails, texts into us, because very shortly we're going to do a special where you fans can actually question RTD in the hot seat. Nothing's off limits, so please go for it.
Right.
They're all the places you can actually get in touch with us. The good one is email at census3@gmail.com. Lots of people write to me, and I've got some slides tonight from some of our friends. Facebook, we've got a great community forum, and X as well are the best ones there. So please join us. And of course, there you go. There it goes. There's the historical facts last night. Same people, same places. Nick's trying to get on. I'll give him a link in a minute again. he's trying to get on. So tonight, RTD1 v RTD2. Season 1 versus Season 1. It's like a mirror image, except it's not. How can RTD get it so right, and then I would argue so wrong? So that's why we're here tonight. There's quite a lot to talk about. So let's have a look. Where do I start? Where do I start on this one? As I'm just trying to get Nick on at the same time. Let me just get this ready here. Oh, yes. I think it's important that we establish credentials and we actually establish a few things that's fair here. Let's go back to the very beginning, folks. Right? Because people and fans are saying, should we rest the show? And this is an interesting point that we could maybe discuss tonight. But remember this moment in Dalek Invasion. One day I shall come back. Yes, I shall come back. Until then, no regrets, no tears, no anxieties. Just go forward in all your beliefs and prove to me that I am not mistaken in mine. Now, you could say that's a mission statement for saying we can rest the show. Don't worry about it. We'll be back. Just believe in the show, but don't tamper with it. We could use that. You know, everybody else, Gary, changes canon and changes how things were meant to be. So we could actually take ownership of that quotation for the wilderness years and then coming back strongly.
Every time I see this quote or picture it on my mind, after he says, I am not mistaken in mine, I feel like the very next thing should be the Davison, theme song, because I associate it with the Five Doctors, which I saw long before Dalek Invasion of Earth. So instead of him saying, goodbye, Susan, goodbye, my dear, I expect that, afterwards.
And I'd never seen that before, that clip, had you?
Oh, no, I don't think I'd seen any Hartnell story when I first saw the Five Doctors.
So yeah, it was shocked me. I mean, Rachel, what would you honestly say now? We're going to get into the weeds of it, but would you say let's just rest the show and take the risk?
Oh, it will be a big risk, but I think it's worth taking, don't you? I think it's a good idea to have a little bit of a rest and then perhaps bring it back in a few years with someone new at the head. That's what I think.
Yes.
There's a lot of factors you have to consider. I know we're not going to get into the full version now, but it's not just about kind of install. I mean, you have to look at it both ways. It's like, well, you have to look at internally about, well, of course you need to install somebody new with a vision to run it, but you have to look at the flip side, which is the public's perception. Has there just been, at this point, just too much baggage, negative baggage accrued to where even if you get really qualified, passionate, capable creators doing it, at this exact moment in time, would even that make a difference? You kind of have to consider both sides.
And we are discussing that, we've been talking about actually, we'll do a show as well as the RTD in the hotspot. The other one is where we methodically look at, can we save this show? How do you actually do it? Not by cancelling and denying. How do we cleverly break down where the problems are and build it up? That would be a hell of a discussion to have.
Yeah.
So if anyone's got suggestions, I can have an essay in Gmail and I can put it on slide and we can discuss it for that show. So do join us for that, folks. Now, and we've just been joined by Nick. I'll scramble Nick on fast. Hello, Nick. Now, if I just show you on this, first of all, teacher me here. Now, RTD1 v RTD2. Now, let me just show you this in entirety, then we'll get chatting. So you've got season 1 there on the left, as you can see. I've rated them red or green or amber according to my feeling of how most fans have judged them. All right, so we can argue about that, but don't worry. It's just to give you a glimmer of it. The yellows are the double episodes where we actually had more in season 1. Remember, he doesn't seem to like them now, but we did have some cliffhangers. Which episodes were written by him, and then I tried to kind of sum up what was actually in some of these. So, for example, in the Rose episode, I've got burping bin and fam. It was all about family, and it was a monster. Just to compare across, because I do think that when we look at what was seen as a successful launch in 2005, we could actually say there was starting to be some problems there as well. And so one of my arguments would be, and I've changed the order you'll see first this season. So Devil's Code and Space Babies in the right order. Then I've moved it around to link it up with the Unquiet Dead. 73 Yards in some ways, I think, is meant to be the Unquiet Dead episode until it decided to leave Wales, that sort of thing. The Long Game was a bit of a political satire on the media. Dot and Bubble does online social media. So I tried to do a bit of that. It's not perfect, and I didn't put Boom next to Boomtown just because I saw the word. I just thought they're the static episodes. So that's just to give you a glimmer, but I'll bring the panel in first, just to kind of give us an overview of, I'm going to contest that although I overall enjoyed season 1, when I look at it now, some of the seeds there, he's gone on repeat, or he's doubled down on, and he's ripped the show apart and spoilt it. So, for example, I'll say one, and then I'll bring you in, Gary. Space Babies was him doing the same puerile humor and silliness as in Rose with the burping bin and then the farting Slovene later on. He'd done it and got away with it there, so he thought, I can do it again with dirty nappies, bogeyman, blah blah blah. So, my contest is Gary, that the seeds were there and he's just repeating them, and of course it's now looking tired and it's not working.
Well, there was rarely a week that went by. I should say hi, Nick. How you doing? Didn't get a chance to say hi before.
Hi, apologies. I don't know what happened to the internet, but I'm here now. I'll be quiet while you talk, Gary. Sorry.
There was rarely a week went by where I wasn't commenting in my notes for our discussions that RTD was like ripping off something. He was either ripping off himself, he was ripping off Moffat, he was ripping off, in a couple cases, it seemed like he was ripping off Chibnall. And I kept saying week after week after week that I just still, like 7 weeks in, 8 weeks in, 12 episodes in, counting the specials and the Christmas, that I still could see no evidence that RTD really had anything new to bring to the table. Putting aside the political problems and stuff, I'm talking like, creative vision, where you saw that he had something brand new that nobody'd seen before, a way to kind of stretch the show, extend the show, and I just never saw it. I mean, if you just focus on your RTD2 chart there,
I'll make it large. Okay.
Looking at the villains now, counting. I know that the Christmas episode isn't on your list because then I like the way that you correlated it all here.
It's at the top.
But I mean, if you think about okay, there it is. Yeah, sorry about that. So if you think about just the villains, focusing on just the villains. So this season we've had, and I tried not to leave anything out, we had singing goblins, we had a snot monster, we had the drag queen music god, we had a politician, we had space racists, we had Bridgerton cosplaying birds, and we had a CGI dog. That was basically the imaginative new villains that RTD was able to come up with. And I think that in no reality does that kind of compare to the 2005.
Well, this is one of the things, Rachel, and obviously you take me where you want to as well, but I'll just make a link up with what Gary said. When I made that chart, I did think, gosh, in season 1, it was mostly monsters, actually. He did monsters. He gave us Doctor Who monsters, whether they were daft Slovene type monsters, etc., but we had Daleks, etc. In this series, as Gary says, it's mostly human villains, which surprises me because this is the fantasy god season.
Yeah, when I didn't think about it much, but when you put it out like that, like lay it out like that, it's sorry, can you come back to me, please? I need to go and get my glasses. I can't see that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Nick, what are you thinking in comparison? As in, I'm seeing a few patterns and a few changes, and a lot of them are. Season 1 looked like to me Doctor Who because it had monsters. We had monsters everywhere, and we had lots of two-parters. Whereas this time it's human villains or villains who are gods who look like humans. To be honest.
Well, yeah. I mean, I believe that the season 1 with Chris Eccleston, at least RTD had it in him to. I know some people said they don't want to see Daleks every season, but we had the Dalek, then we had the Daleks at the end in the parting of ways. And even things like the Slovene, I know that they were a bit jokey the way they farted and that, but they were a proper monster, weren't they? They were something you could get behind, something menacing. And you're right, this season with Ncuti, there are an awful lot of humans, aren't there? And it's and you point out, yes, there's no real two-parters, are there? There's no story which
No, no, and I think,
leads
Nick,
on.
it makes it more domestic. I have to say, there's the messaging, there's all that stuff that every stream in the world and every Doctor Who fan talks about. But on top of that, just look at who the enemies are, and because they look humanoid, it just takes it more domestic.
Here's one way to look at it, Brendan. What would be which villain, monster, whatever, from this last season would you think quality-wise could fit into the 2005 season?
I'll be honest, even though it's hurting me to say it, but I would have thought if you didn't have him as the bogeyman made by bogies, if you had him as just a monster creature in a ship, he would be worse than the Slovenians, probably.
Well, no, I mean, okay, that's fine, but I mean, no, you have to take it as we got it.
Yeah, well,
if
no,
you take it as we got it. Would any of these villains fit?
No, that was Fungus the Bogeyman, as I had in one of my alternative thumbnails. No, the Snot Monster, no. I'm not interested in villains. I do like the Star Trek franchise, but give me a humanoid villain and I'm bored rigid. Q, bye-bye, Park. I can't stand it. And so this has been a dreary series on so many scores. What were you going to say, Rachel?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about the answer to your question now that I can actually read it a bit better. Yeah, it was just you're right, actually. There are a lot of villains in it, much more than perhaps what it is normally, because we're used to the Master, maybe the odd sort of like villain coming in now and then, and we get mostly monsters and aliens and that. Do you know what I think the reason why this is? We've gone so a lot of these are some kind of like they're not even pantheons, are they? The only one that was pantheon, now that I think about it, was in Devil's Cord. Oh, and the Susan Twist character, the minion of Sutek. Yeah. I think the reason why this was done was because it was easier to get across the messaging.
Yeah,
and people can relate to that more and listen to that more in that respect, because it's coming from someone that looks like us.
So just for a minute, as I just park that there, so we can kind of catch our breath. So I'm making my first argument thread that this season, compared to the first season, is much more domestic in look. Whether it feels fantasy or not, it's just humanoid characters. Then you've got the messaging on top, and then you've got the soap opera on top of that. Add soap on top of humanoid villains and the messaging, and it just feels like it's 2024. Whereas Escapist Who, we went to the end of the world itself, Lady Cassandra, the lot. And I just feel as though the whole thing's changed. Now, just for a minute, while you're just having a think panel, I'll bring some of our friends in.
I do think... Sorry.
Yeah. Anthony Parkinson, the damage from series 2 will make what we've just watched seem like a golden age. We'll get full RTD. No, don't say it. You're scaring me. Stop it. Over the overseer, one thing to remember is back in 2005, fans had more of a disconnect between the classic series and New Who. We let a lot more slide, but we weren't holding the episodes to the same standard. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. It was more successful, though, in its delivery, I think. And Muck, do you know what? I think he was more vigilant and careful. We know there were nerves when they were making Aliens of London, their very first, episode. We know they made mistakes. We know he knew he had to be on the money. And I think you got a different version of RTD compared to this one, who's had more time in the industry with apparently pats on the back. And I therefore see a different manifestation. Carl Z, because he's writing to his own ideologies and preferences and using the show to hammer them across, which will be fully backed by the left-wing BBC, it's nothing more than agenda. The show is lost. I mean, it was unbelievable. Honestly, Gary, today, Nigel Farage, I was sent the speech, mentioned Doctor Who. Now, when Doctor Who is being mentioned in a general election by certain politicians, you know that this has gone in the wrong place.
I didn't hear that. What was the context that he mentioned the show?
He didn't say much. I think he just made it as an example. He just said he was in Birmingham NEC talking to 5,000, and he just said that he was getting a question on one of the BBC shows last week from somebody who worked on Doctor Who, and he said who had been pushing these 8 episodes And he said, I used to love Doctor Who, said Nigel Farage. And he said, and now it's garbage. And so that was, and this is in the general election.
Yeah.
It's a family show.
You know,
I mean, if it's getting a politician to speak publicly like that, then you know you've really,
especially one like Nigel Farage as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say I disagree with him, but you know, the thing about one last point that just popped into my head, Brendan, about your previous question, in terms of is he lifting ideas? We even had a whole scene that, which is Ruby in Space Babies, was a whole scene which is staged exactly the same as the scene in End of the World. We all commented on it, where the dialogue was practically the same, the positions of the actors were pretty much the same, you know, and it's like and we all commented he couldn't even think of a different way to basically effectively, you know, do that same type of scene. So he just kind of lifted from himself. But the thing about it is, with 2005 versus 2024, Brendan, you were right. I mean, there was so much writing on this back then. And if it had failed because of RTD's, you know, going too far overboard on his, you know, own preferences or whatever, he would have been, his career would have been severely impacted. This had to be, you know, it had to succeed with the general audience. It had to not only satisfy the fans who had been, you know, hungering for it for 16 years. It basically was a proof that the concept was still viable for a general public. So there was that bar that he had to meet. So he was basically answering to a lot of masters, you know, back then in what he had to come up with. And now, as he is so proud of proclaiming, you know, whenever he can, this Russell T Davies answers to no one. I mean, he is a political activist who is kind of shoehorning his own personal ideology and unfortunately, his own kind of sexual fantasies into stories, whether it destroys the canon of the show and the history of the characters or not. Here's the big difference. Back then, RTD probably knew that he was the caretaker of the show, as how many showrunners and producers over the years have said, well, I'm just the caretaker. I have to take care of it. And then when I go, I hand it off to the next person. The 2005 Russell T Davies was the caretaker. Now he's the controller. And that is a huge difference.
Now, I do know I'm going to do something slightly different, because we're analyzing this whole success and building on obviously what Gary was saying. I also want to bring in people from the thread who've written to me, and I promised them that actually, rather than just kind of look as though they're wasting time, here we go. So let me just show you this. So if I'll go big, I'm sorry, Rachel, I'll read various bits out, but I'll offer a couple of positives, Time Muddler, for each in advance, if that's okay. The whole Who is the Doctor business in the very first episode, Rose, we learn that the Ninth Doctor has popped up in all over human history, Krakatoa, JFK, remember that's the first scene, yeah? And yet he visits Rose's flat, looks in the mirror, flaps his ears as if he's just regenerated. Did he have them just before deciding to come and offer Rose a second chance to travel with him? Why is it a highlight to him? Because it really got me speculating all over again about this character. And I remember many other fans at the time doing likewise. It's there for us to ponder. Good writing invites the writer to fill in the gaps that aren't essential to explain. Bad writing is when it doesn't explain stuff that it should. Plus, Eccleston himself had me at run. The slug monsters in Dot and Bubble are a solid concept. They just aren't utilised as well as they could have been. Ideally, they'd have been part of a darker lit gothic story. Either way, they're head and shoulders above the silliness like the Sylvine. And so I want to say thank you to Muldwich, because there's some interesting points there. Nick, would you like to bring out any from what Muldwich said, or challenge them, or agree?
Well, I completely, I can sort of completely agree with Moldwitch there. RTD does very much feel like, this is going to sound like a strange analogy. He very much feels like Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight when he says that thing, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain, because that kind of feels what's happened with RTD. Starts out so good, and I'm absolutely. I was thinking about the first episode about an hour ago when I got when I got a message from you saying, "Can you come on tonight?" And I was thinking that the scene with the ears, everything about it. I don't know if I'm going on a bit of a wobbly tangent here, trying to get myself to where I'm going, but yeah, no, I do agree with Moldwitch there. He makes some very valid points. The whole thing befuddles me somewhat.
It's interesting what he says about I don't even know what you call them slug monsters. I mean, we even get a name, but those slug monsters, I think we said at the time in our Rogue review, no, not Rogue, sorry, Dot and Bubble review, that it was daytime. They were very slow. I didn't see much jeopardy.
Well, yeah,
once they got you. But
those monsters were wasted. They were wasted, and I agree. They certainly shouldn't have been in the daylight. I mean, the whole episode of Dot and Bubble was a good concept executed badly. It didn't really pay off at the end. I don't think the message paid off at the end. I mean, like when Gary said earlier, can it take a monster from this series and any monster you can think that you could put into season 1? I think the only one I could see, because those slugs are executed so badly, are probably the bird people in Rogue. I just think RTD doesn't quite know how to bring the horror anymore. It's a kid's show, but he doesn't know how to things like lighting, things like how you execute monsters.
But Nick, I'll come back to you, because you're bringing up an interesting point. I said in a stream a long time ago now, in fact, that somebody might remember the slide. I showed all of RTD's stories, and I judged them myself, right? Red, amber, green. When you look at RTD's stories in seasons 1 to 4, I wasn't impressed with many of them. It's the Moffat ones and other people's ones, Paul Cornell and all those. Actually, apart from Midnight, Turn Left, Stolen Earth, there's a few I can shout out, but after that, they're not scary. They're not Doctor Who.
No, but I felt modern Doctor Who. I mean, Brendan, I haven't said this on the show before. My favorite era of modern Doctor Who's been Matt Smith, and from the 11th hour, that's when I felt, when Moffat came in, that it started to have that real feel of Who for me, connecting back to the old days. I don't think RTD, he certainly didn't do a bad job of bringing it back, because look, it led to Moffat, it led to it, the glory days of the new Who, shall we say, for me is up to the regeneration with Capaldi, although there were some shaky points with Capaldi's writing. But yeah, RTD, he's more childlike in his storytelling. And I know people say this is a kid's show, but let's face it, it's more of a young adult show now, isn't it?
Well, when we do ratings, Rachael, I'll tell you exactly what his strategy is, because he will tell us,
Sorry if I'm waffling there.
It's
a lot to sort of process.
So Gary, that you can see one argument there, and I'm going to bring one other up as well, by the way, because when I say our thread, our viewers have been really interested on this, and it is that time to reflect. So let me show you this, Gary, and please pick and choose and all the rest of it. So if I show you this from David Hardin, he knew the show tonight was on this. So he said, comparing both eras is like comparing apples and oranges. The conditions under which Doctor Who is being produced now seem to be very different. In 2005, the BBC wholly owned Doctor Who. 2023, Bad Wolf, blah, blah, blah. Also, back in 2005, the show had been off the air for 15 years. It had just won some pull for it had, yes, for the people in the UK most wanted to see return. There was a real appetite, Gary.
Oh, of course. And I mean, the wilderness years had sparked a lot of ingenious creativity from fans, with kind of like non-canon Doctors coming in and Big Finish starting and all of the novels and everything. And it was a real time for a lot of the people who would end up creating the stories for RTD's first era to kind of hone their craft, either through, you know, writing or whatever. And so it was like the perfect storm that the fans wanted it back. There was a lot of capable people who could bring it back. And I mean, I think saying that, well, RTD is just kind of resting on his laurels is a little bit too simplistic. It talks about, I think we have to consider what, if we're keeping the focus on RTD, what did he want to accomplish in each era, and what did he know that he needed to do to be a success in that era? We've kind of alluded to it already.
Yeah.
I actually think, you know, one of the, what you just mentioned, you were going through some of the stories, Brendan, in the first season.
Yeah.
I was kind of reviewing all of the Eccleston's first season, and this is not me just, you know, doing random RTD bashing. I actually think the best stories of season 1 weren't done by RTD.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I think, in fact, a lot of his episodes in that season were among the worst. I mean, they're a lot of them are silly, childish, simplistic. I think he overloaded his episodes with the kind of childish, you know, farting aliens or the alien pig or the Slitheen or whatever. I mean, all the episodes that we associate with the top tier of season 1, Unquiet Dead was written by Mark Gatiss, Dalek by Rob Shearman, Father's Day, Paul Cornell, Empty Child and Dr. Dances, Moffat, all of the high points in that. You know, Rose was, I guess, kind of a good establishing, because I think RTD knew that if he blew the opening episode, that would be it. But every great episode in this season wasn't done by him.
No. And if you look how I've graded it, it is only my grading, and some of them I've gone against myself because I think most fans received it well. So Rose wasn't a favorite of mine at all. I know he had a job to do, but I found it boring, to be quite frank. And if you really look back at Rose, and we did a stream recently where we reviewed Rose again, I honestly, really, what happens? You see the Autons possibly really twice have some action. It's pretty tame and lame stuff. But I put green there because I think most fans thought it was a good relaunch. But you can see the red, amber, and the green. Aliens of London and World War III is, you know, slagged off by a lot of fans now, isn't it? Really, overall, especially the second episode. So I've put that as red. But then he's got a lot of amber. Boomtown's his, although I personally quite like that. Father's Day, Long Game, with that ridiculous monster. The End of the World, I kind of liked, but I know some fans slag it. So I've tried to be fair to that. So it's not me personally. I'm just trying to kind of get where most of us are, which is a hard thing to do. But you then look at the colouring of this era, and am I wrong? I know when we did all our reviews, I can't think of anybody, and the grading, there's no green to be seen. There really isn't. So it brings to mind what we've been talking about all season. Now, I just want to say hello to the thread because there's a lot going on. Hello, Problem Being. He's putting people right because somebody said it's a gay show now. I know why they said that. And of course, Problem Being knows that we use certain different words now. If you're part of Bad Wolf, they have their agendas. And so he's putting them right on that one, which I understand. Easton Burkholder, maybe RTD is trying to fight battles he wanted to fight decades ago. I think there's a lot in this, you know. He's fired up. He is back with his ideology. He does see this as a platform. When me and Hugh did the RTD documentary ages ago in November, it's still there.
The most recent comment by Divining Dragon, I think, hits the nail right on the head. No, not this one. The one that is a response to me, where he says RTD was more a producer shepherding a coterie of qualified writers. However, he is now the dominant writer. In a way, it appears his strength isn't in writing for Doctor Who proper. I think that's.
And what I want to say, Gary, while we're on that, is obviously because we're going to look and enjoy some elements of the good and the bad of the Eccleston era first, and then we're going to look at the Shooty era and pull it together like that. Divining Dragon sent me a lovely kind of essay in email form, and as I promised him, I've got it for that part of the program. So he's got a lot more to say, Gary, and you'll see it. RTD, as he's I was going to read it out again. That would have been crazy.
Well, before we go into kind of looking at the highlights of season 1, One of the
And
things
lowlights.
I was thinking this, the 2005 season one. Please feel free to disagree with me. I just don't think it's I mean, not even keeping the focus on Doctor Who. I just don't think it's possible to make good television when you have, you know, an ideologue producer, especially one who's kind of fixated and obsessed about particular things as RTD. You can't produce good television when you have an ideologue producer who believes he's untouchable and he feels free to do whatever he wants without input or interference. Good television is never going to result from that. It's a collaborative process.
Except, as Rachel greeted us tonight, and there's our last stream yesterday with Disparu, and he made the very point, and Rachel was remarking on it again today, which is when he was talking about the Acolyte, he was talking about the disaster there, and we were just talking before we came on stream tonight about the fact that which media executives of which franchises are not doing the very same thing as Russell T Davies. It's a bit of their fiefdom. They're changing Star Wars. They're changing all these franchises to reflect themselves or to push an agenda they want, and killing every franchise off. And then they come up with some Tommy rot that basically ratings don't matter. It's a man, Rachel, there must be loads y'all wanting to say on this kind of mush before we go into highs and lows of the season one, before we apparently try and find some highs and lows of this season one.
I don't actually have that much to say. Everyone's pretty much already said it. I will say, I think now that we've got Disney involved, and Disney definitely, in my opinion, have an agenda for sure, because they have a very high DEI as well, and they want to push things that never got pushed before. I think perhaps maybe part of their input and their control is allowing to Russell T Davies to actually go ahead and do all of these things that he couldn't do.
Yeah. And Adrian Sherlock, I'll put up here. Adrian, later on, the point you're making, we'll put it to the test with our ratings watcher. Diversity should be in the audience. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. But Davies is aiming for a small percentage of the audience only. And that is the problem. That
who's not even watching.
It ostracizes everyone else. It's not like he's actually gone out and asked the people who technically he should actually be writing it for, which are the families. He's just writing it for his own sake and for the minority group. There are ways to accommodate for the minority group in writing for the majority. You've just got to be able to tackle both at the same time. It's how you do it.
So what we're going to do, rather than get too kind of, bogged down in all the, because the season's just finished and it's still up there, isn't it? You say Sutek and Tales of the TARDIS, and you say all the reset buttons, and it's all there. But what we really wanted to do tonight is remind ourselves and enjoy a bit of nostalgia for once. We are Doctor Who fans after all, and be fair with the season one of Chris Eccleston, the good and the bad. And I have to say there are issues. There he is. And Divine and Dragon, yes, in many respects, when we talk about representation, it's almost as if the representation they want to see is themselves. Wait till you see Divine and Dragon. I've got some great quotes from our God himself on this one. Wait till you get our ratings watcher this time. Oh, my God. But anyway.
I was just thinking, considering what he turned Sutek into, should we start referring to it as Bad Wolf?
Well, I have seen somebody say that actually maybe that was the hint, but there's my subtle hint. Is that subtle enough for everybody? If you've joined us, we're around 920 subs. You would just make me feel a bit better just having the 1K. I want to be a millennial. Am I allowed to be a millennial at my age? Please make me a millennial, or I'll cry and cry and cry like Bonnie Landford. Oh, sorry. She's grown up now, like him. So please
come on, people, subscribe. I don't need the crying voice messages anymore.
I mean,
just give them the sub, people. Give them the sub.
Give me a sub, or they get it.
that might make people not sub, Brendan.
Yeah. I was going to say, would some people complain about that or not?
Every day I'm going to have a hostage video of one of these puppets.
Subscribe, or the puppet gets it.
Subscribe, or they get it. So yeah, there you go. That you get to see my whole lovely human nature now. So right, okay. I showed you earlier. Does this? I mean, let's just get into it on the goods and the bads, and I'll pick on people to come in. just seeing that poster again,
Yeah.
and not the swirly, multicolored froth of the Cosmic Joyride now, even if it is on New York subways and stuff. That really just gets me excited, nervous about, is it going to work? That whole era, those brilliant adverts with Billy and Chris, when, do you want to come with me? And you got clips and you saw the TARDIS and it was all grungy and choral, and some of the dialogue, and I will give it to RTD. Who would have mentioned chips in the second episode after seeing loads of aliens in space?
Yeah.
But RTD does it. He grounds it well, but I don't mean bring it soap opera. But, she's a 19-year-old girl. She wanted chips. It had been a stressful trip. So I got it. And actually, Gary, I'm going to come to one of your highlights first, okay?
Oh,
and so
okay.
if you want to preface it, it's your good old Rob Shearman one.
Oh, are you talking about what I thought was one of the best moments?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, yeah, of course. What I think was the high point of the season, and quite possibly, I think, Chris Eccleston's finest 5 minutes in the whole year is when he first saw the Dalek in Dalek. I mean, that is a master class in depicting in rapid succession. He's terrified, and then he's laughing in relief, and then he's angry, and then you could see that he still feels guilty about being forced to destroy them in the Time War. It's just, I mean, the way, and he, every single one of those is, I mean, he sells it completely. You believe that the Doctor is feeling all of these things.
Yeah.
And the fact that he could be so abjectly terrified as the Doctor, banging on the door, let me out, let me out, let me out, because you realize that he's still suffering from PTSD from the Time War. That may be the one moment that crystallizes that he's still, in the throes of the PTSD from the Time War, as opposed to, and I think that, I mean, we could talk all about the difference of, well, what's the difference between, when Ncuti was petrified or whatever. Ncuti's doctor is a doctor who supposedly had already worked through his issues. He was supposed to be the newly cleansed post-therapy doctor. He doesn't have the excuse. Eccleston was just amazing. The clip of that scene is on YouTube, and it's mesmerizing, that scene.
It's a great scene. It's a great scene. You see the survivor's guilt. You see the trauma. You see the panic. All those emotions that come flooding out of him in that scene, showcasing Chris's acting, but also the writing. And you, even though you don't know a lot about the Time War at that point, you know enough to know that it was bad, and you get a feeling that short time of everything the Doctor's been through. And I think that was a great
scene. To see the Doctor like that, I know. I mean, if you go back to Classic Who, which is all we had then, was when has the Doctor really let rip on a Dalek like that? And as you say, Gary, there was a mixture of fear and anger after the Time War, which we were still only learning snippets about. Yes, he spat at the. I mean, it was fab. It was acting.
Now, and he even throws the switch, and he's actually going to kill the Dalek, and it's only because all the guards come in and pull him off that he didn't.
Now, this was the moment that Hugh was going to say. He was going to be on until we had to reschedule. Do you know, like we were saying about the Earth revolving, it's like when you were kids, the first time they tell you the world's turning and you just can't believe it because everything looks like it's standing still. I can still feel it. The turn of the Earth, the ground beneath our feet is spinning 1,000 miles an hour. Remember all that. I mean, I have to say, the Rose didn't excite me as an episode, but my God, when that dialogue was delivered on a housing estate, it was very pedestrian context. You thought, oh gosh, this is Doctor Who's up the stakes here. That's good dialogue. Oh yes, I loved it. So that's Hughes. Yeah, and you see, this is it. RTD could land it then. I really do. You know, I accepted a burping bin if you got dialogue like that, because you could see he was more than a human. He was special. He was different.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and keep bringing everybody in, but I'll just make some progress furthermore. There's the end of the world. Now, this is one of the scenes you wanted to mention, Rachel, on the bad side.
On the bad side, yeah. Yeah, this held a bit of contention for me, because Rose just goes into that TARDIS at the end of Rose. That sounded really weird. And she didn't think about it, and he took her off without a thought. It was careless. And then he takes her to the end of the world, and he shows her all of this, and she has this sudden realization that her whole entire family at the end of the world is dead. They're gone. And yet he still activates her phone so she can phone them. And it's like, that's actually really irresponsible. But it just sort of like, yeah, that was really bad. I mean, I don't have much to say about that. But when you said the good and the bad, that was an easy choice.
And can I just say, and I'm going to see what the thread and you all say, because obviously I put David Harding and Muldwich up already, and I can't remember between the two of them. One of them, I think, was Muldwich, said they loved the bit when the doctor said, "Run." Do you know what?
Yes.
I couldn't stand that moment, and I wonder whether it was just a sign that I keep calling it Americanization. It's not, because he's just talking, but it's like, it's kind of, come on, run. And I don't know, it wasn't kind of doctorish. I know Troughton has always said, when I say run, run, that's always the running joke, I know. But it was just the way it was done. Anyway, it is an awkward moment for me, but I allowed it to go knowing it was a rushed 44-minute episode, because now we get Doctor Who at speed. That's the problem with Doctor Who now. Anyway, so that was a quickie just to say, you know, one of my downs, because I've only got ups for myself. Well, when we're going to move on a few highlights and lowlights, and by the way, I'm going to break this up thread so that we get to the ratings watch a bit, because my God, it's going to be tasty, and I know you're all waiting for it. Nick, have you got a higher or low of the Eccleston era you want to call out? Hold on, you're mute.
You're muted.
Apologies. My
right.
boy was shouting in the background, so I've been muting in between because it's pre-bedtime. You'll probably hate me now and go, what Doctor Who fan are you? What's the name of the episode where they go back in time to Rose's dad and they rescue him? And thank you very much. Thank you. Sorry about that. As Rachel said, if you want a bad moment, there's a bad moment. What an irresponsible moment to ever let Rose anywhere near where she could see her father. How was that not going to pan out badly? You've got a 19 or 20-year-old, not emotionally mature yet, obviously got issues because she grew up without her dad, and you take her back to that scene and look at the carnage you create. There's moments where the Doctor just comes across really irresponsible. I would agree with the end of the world moment with the phone, but that moment there, if there's a bad moment where I think, Doctor, that was irresponsible, you should never have done that.
Since you've mentioned that, Nick, it was something I wanted to bring up, because, you know, I said I'm always finding seeds problems later in the Ncuti series. And in a way, was RT as good as we thought he was? Because this moment was very like the time window where he was telling Ruby, don't move because you're in the time window. And she saw her mum. She saw her mum, just like Rose saw her dad. And the impulse must be so strong. So he shouldn't have really put her in that situation. So, yes, you calling out this situation, and I'm linking it to the Ncuti Legend of Ruby Sunday, which I thought was crazy. Let that Manchester soldier risk his life, but you better not move, Ruby. But the other thing I think is ridiculous here, and I can't get my head around, RTD is a soap opera writer and he doesn't think deeply enough. If you think about what he says in this quotation here, there's a man alive in the world who wasn't alive before. An ordinary man. That's the most important thing in creation. The whole world's different because he's alive. The time has been changed, and we had the Reapers, wasn't it? That they were clawing at the church, and they had to sort that out. He changes time, all that. He saved the bogeyman monster. that was all right because it was a homage to Aliens. So that's all right then, as the toy maker would say.
That's right.
You know, he changes the Ncuti Gatwa doctor seems to change events all the time and save people if he wants to. And yet here he quite rightly said you can't make a different time, parallel. Anyway, there's one. Rachael. Oh, sorry, it's Gary next. Gary, if you've done a high, your low, you've already seen it, but do you want to mention your low from the era?
I had two. One of them
I'm ready
was,
for
I think you mentioned, was just the low-hanging fruit of the burping trash bin in Rose. That was just embarrassing. I mean, I know he probably thought that was cute. The kiddies would love it, but that was just like, for the first episode, I just went, you're just going, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You want to put your best foot forward, like in every single scene and in every single line. And this was just, to associate the Autons with burping trash cans. And my other one was every single appearance of the Slitheen. I grouped a worst moment into one. Every single appearance of the Slitheen in this season. Aliens of London, World War III, Boomtown. I thought they just came off as childish and kind of and irredeemably silly. Giving them claws doesn't matter. It's just,
do you know what?
Just
Gary?
too visually, and with farting. I thought, well, who's. I thought at times, like, Russell, don't you want this show to be taken seriously anymore, for a new generation?
Well, you see, this is the key to looking at the two seasons, isn't it? Because you had the Slitheen who came back in Boomtown, as you said. You had in the Shooter Gatwa era, we had callbacks, and we had the different pantheon of gods lining up, the harbingers lining up. You had the Susan Twist. You had various kind of repeats going on, and he'd like to do it here. He did the same with the Daleks, of course, in season one. The issue with the Slitheen, and this is where we can have a nice little debate for a second, is this. This is one of my favorite moments of the first season, which was Boomtown. And I know you didn't, when you were texting me, and I thought, oh, well, this will be interesting because it was a cheap episode, and it was just there so he could plant something, the TARDIS time vortex, because that was his saving, reset button. So he had to have this moment when she had to go back to being a pod. But I did like some of the writing. It sometimes allows you to breathe. And I thought, actually, the Doctor has never faced consequences. And I did like that discussion. Ooh,
no, that's fine. No, I'm not going to rebut you on that. This was a good scene, but once again, not with the Slitheen in the costume, not with doing the silly preschool farting and everything.
Yeah.
This is just an alien character sitting down with the Doctor and having a conversation, not in the context of being the aspect of the Slitheen that I did consider kind of embarrassing. I know that sounds like I'm trying to have it both ways.
No, you were hitting on another thing. I know. I just thought it was interesting to bring up. So just for that second, we've been looking at elements of the Eccleston era. You keep telling us, but I've promised you that we are trying to do a few things here, compare two seasons, and we've done a lot on Chris Eccleston with kind of, throwaway lines to Ncuti, knowing that last night that did a lot of the heavy work. But I think for a moment, we now need to do some heavy work on where we stand with this series now. So
if I could, one quick thing about Rose, because I really was looking at that photo of Rose and the Doctor that you put up as they're just kind of walking along the street, going to get chips.
Yeah.
And even in that single shot, you can see, well, the reason that Rose, the episode, worked and Rose, the character, worked in that first season is because RTD took the time to build up Ruby as a character that we can care about, not only through her family life, but we see kind of what her dreams are for life. We can see how they're both instantly having an effect on each other.
Yeah.
We immediately kind of, honed in on that, her individually and the two of them together. The huge difference between the Rose surrogate now, which is Ruby, is all of RTD's efforts were focused on building up the arc of who is Ruby's mom. I didn't care about who Ruby's mom was because RTD didn't bother to take the time to build up Ruby as a character that I should care about. And then I'll maybe care about, what her lineage is.
Yeah.
It's a stark difference from 2005.
We'll definitely fire on all that because we've got the finale to talk about regarding judgments of the 2 seasons and all the rest of it. Peter Harrington, it's interesting because we always have you on, and it's interesting. You're making a few points. Maybe we disagree on a few things, which is allowed. But I do want to bring an awful lot of things in. I mentioned the consequences thing with Boomtown, and that's what you've picked up on. He had many consequences in the past. Warriors of the Deep, Resurrection of the Daleks, many died. It's just, did he face them? Tegan walked away, didn't she, after Resurrection? She was the one who couldn't deal with it anymore. There'd been too much death. The Peter Davison Doctor then just got in the TARDIS, didn't he? So I just found it interesting that for once Doctor Who was allowed to breathe and talk about that. But yeah, maybe we're on the same page. The thread, you're very active. I'm going to have to come back in a moment, but let's do what as I promised. The Ratings Watcher, which is looking at target audience, and he's got a strategy as RTD. Oh yeah, it's all been thought through. Yep, here's the strategy. Well, I mean, this bit you've seen before, but I just wanted to remind you where you were. That was the famous bit we've talked about a few times. He has said, hasn't he, that actually he's not as bothered about the ratings. They are lower than I thought, but they're aiming for the under 30s. Well, that's been packed out an awful lot more now. So I'm going to show you where. Good old Radio Times, who seems to be just the gift that keeps giving. Doctor Who's ratings are a success for RTD in a way that's crucial to its future. Now, he then goes into, and I'm going to show you slides, and we can pick at them as we go, right? There's a few slides. Overnight ratings no longer provide an accurate picture for all those who watch drama in an on-demand world. Episode 1 has already been viewed by nearly 6 million viewers, and then he says, and it's the BBC's top drama for under 35s. Now, I'll just show you one more slide, and then we can talk about where you go with it. He's trying to make the show more accessible and easier to follow so that new viewers can join fandom. Not by betraying the show core values, but by returning to them, because this is a family show. Now, I'm thinking, listen, mate, nobody give me a step ladder into Doctor Who. I either got it or I didn't. But they didn't say, right, Genesis of the Daleks is for Brendan to join Doctor Who. So what we're going to do... Come on, this is... Why does everybody have to be patronized in 2024? You either like Doctor Who or you don't. Let's be honest. Every kid got it or they didn't. That's all. But we didn't have to kind of coax them like the child catcher and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, waving lollies at them and stuff. And how many times to say you're going to make it accessible and easier to follow for new viewers to join the fandom where lots of fans are leaving fandom? It doesn't make any sense to me, Nick.
That annoys me so much. So you guys know, and you've met my son on camera now. We have a little Whovian at 10 years old. Now, one thing I have never done is force any of my likes up on my kid. I just don't do it. If he finds it, obviously Doctor Who's around him because me and my wife, I mean, we love Doctor Who. We had Rose, Tennant, and K9 on our wedding cake, for goodness sake. That's how mad we are on it. Jackson's been a fan of Doctor Who for 3 years now, really getting into it. He was watching the classic episodes because I literally bought a bundle of the classic DVDs at a car boot sale. He's been watching the new stuff. No one had to make special exceptions to bring a then 7-8-year-old in. So this premise, this idea that we need to change Doctor Who to make it inviting for other people annoys me. As you said, Brendan, you either get it or you don't.
Yeah.
Why are we making special exceptions to bring people in? No one made a special exception for me. When I decided to sit down as a kid on UK Gold and watch episodes with John Pertwee in and Colin Baker and whatnot, you know, no one made special exceptions for me. I chose to sit there and watch it because something about the appeal of the show for what it was appealed to me. Am I making sense, Brendan? Am I making sense, panel? Do we need to make this to make this more inviting?
If I asked Rachel, when you started watching Doctor Who, my parents were there. If I didn't get it, my parents would have explained it to me if I needed it. But as a kid, you tend to you get a vibe. I think with Doctor Who as a kid, I just got the vibe that it's scary. You have to tuck up on the settee and you buckle down.
Yeah, I watched... I can't remember if it was Earthshock or Twin Dilemma that I watched first. It was one of the two, and it was on VHS at a friend's house. And what a way to be introduced to Doctor Who, throttling of a companion and the death of a companion. I mean, you can't go any more crazier than that. But no one forced me. No one forced me to watch that. And my mum certainly wouldn't have done. She was terrified of Doctor Who. And when I used to watch it on things like Gold and VHS, I'd be like, well, I didn't get scared easily, but if it was like, I'm terrified of the Autons. If it was the Autons, I would be like, oh my goodness. And then I was obsessed about the Daleks. And I told you before, I used to sit between the washing machine with this weird gadget thing, pretending to be a Dalek, or I put a basket on my head. No one coaxed me into doing that. My brothers don't watch it. My sister doesn't watch it. My dad likes it, but my dad also wouldn't have done things like that. He wouldn't have coached me into it.
Gary, as I bring it to you, I'll move the slides on, but you can pick up at any point, obviously. I am less than a handful of years away. Now, this is the writer of the Radio Times article. It's all about them, remember? Soon I won't be under 35, which doesn't bother me. Oh, good for you. I grew up with the Doctor and will continue growing with the Doctor. I don't need or want to be the target audience. I personally think there shouldn't need to be a target audience. And then I read, as Cinema normally says, he knows it's a danger colour with me, it should be thrilling to any Doctor Who fans to see that the show has such impressive ratings among the under 35s. I mean,
I would first tell the writer that no, people don't sit down and give an hour of their life to a show because they heard that it's popular with a particular segment, of the ratings breakdown. As Nick just said, you sit there and watch it because something, even if you can't define it, it grabs you and like compels you to watch. You love something even if you can't explain why, and that's probably true for a lot of Doctor Who fans. It's the thing is like I love to be, kids love to be scared, or they love the monsters, whatever. If you could put up I want to comment on RTD's actual thing, which was the slide right before this one. Now, when I read this, that does not betray the core values, returning to them, I read all that and I think that I think two things. Either one, that he is suffering from colossal self-delusion, or he thinks we're all idiots. Because that is the most patently absurd comment. The show's more accessible and easier to follow. That's why he's tapping into, stuff from the classic series.
That's where the quote's from, Gary. You can see there.
Yeah, it just... Okay, he wanted to make it simpler. He wanted to make it younger. So, okay. So, basically... the success of Doctor Who over 60 years was in spite of the fact that it wasn't simplistic and it wasn't solely targeted to the youngest viewers. Somehow, even though apparently the classic series and the rest of New Who was doing it wrong by having the stories be kind of well written, sometimes complex with great characters, and by aiming it at all age groups, somehow in spite of that, it was a success. But now Russell T Davies thinks, no, the way to go for success is Doctor Who is to make everything totally simplistic and aim it for the kiddies, which basically, to me, that's his safety net. That means he can get away with scripts that are half written with plot holes abundant because the little kiddies who have no discernment won't care.
This is the problem, Rachel. I mean, we mentioned Castrovalva the other day. Look at Legopolis. Look at E-Space. Look at Warrior's Gate. I never understood it as a kid, but I watched it. Look at the whole, argument in Logopod. I didn't understand the maths that was going on really there. Christopher H. Bidmead really did big it up on the science. I was watching. I always mention Genesis of the Daleks and the language. This, to me, Rachel, honestly, you're a teacher too. You don't pitch to where they are now. You pitch over them a bit, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Just a little bit over, so it's attainable, and well within their reach. And then when they do actually get it, they feel like they've actually achieved something, which they have, And that was, to me, as a child watching Doctor Who, that was also the whole point of Doctor Who. I didn't understand everything, but I got enough to be able to try and work the rest of it out. And when I did, I was like, oh, even if it was a few years later, you just gotta make it within reach.
This is where his strategy, his next few slides is all his strategy, which is everybody in their life needs to say who their doctor was and where they were when they knew who their doctor was. So he's focusing all his strategy on these under 35s so that they have that moment, so they grow throughout their lives and stick with Doctor Who. Forgetting the fact that those, he's saying, once you've got them as kids, you'll get them for life. And then he's forgetting that the ones who've been Doctor Who fans for life, he's saying you can clear off. So it's kind of, I don't understand the logic of it. I want fans to find Doctor Who and stick with it, but the fans who have stuck with it, clear off.
And where does all the where does the insertion of all the sexual agenda fit in? Is that part of making it? Is that part of making it simpler, or is that part of aiming it for kids? Because that's got to. If those are his two emphasis, then all the sexual stuff has got to fit in one of those two.
And another thread, I'm coming back to the thread in a minute because you're saying some interesting stuff. He's called it a family show and you're saying, no, it's not. Davies has also previously spoken about the show's LGBTQ plus representation and the importance of disability representation. Right, okay, we're not knocking that. Which are elements children and young people need to see. They're not asking for it. Somebody's saying, a bad wolf in the BBC, they need to see it. Now, I must admit, when I used to talk to kids and then mention Doctor Who in passing, they were not complaining that there'd not been a woman doctor when there hadn't been. They weren't saying we need to see ourselves in it. And by the way, can we all speak as Doctor Who fans? I didn't see myself in Doctor Who ever. I find it
annoying that people need to see. Russell T Davies is assuming that people don't grow up or see this stuff. So my son doesn't see the same-sex couple who have adopted a kid every day picking up their kid from school. He doesn't see my friend Mark who comes round who is openly gay. When I was growing up and I lived across the road from a lady called Sylvia who had a business called Cinderfellas, making clothes for transsexual men. And I used to go and play around that house and play Star Wars with her grandkids. I didn't see it. No, of course I saw it. Who the hell is he to be the one to put it out there? This stuff is out there. He makes out like this stuff isn't out there for people to see.
See, he makes out
like the world is blinkered and it's not.
Well, he set
Sorry, I got a bit
himself. He set
ranty then.
himself up as the kind of moral arbiter for us. That he knows better. He knows better than we do what we need. He knows better than the children's parents what the children need to see. He set himself up as the kind of judge and jury about, you know, what's best for society, what's best for the families, what's best for the kids. My question for him would be, after that comment on the last slide about this is what children need to see, is if I ever met him, I'd ask him this. I would say, Russell, why is it so important to you personally that young children are exposed to this? Why is that so important to you? And I don't think I need to ask him that question, because I actually think I probably know, and it's something he'd never say, but that's what it comes down to. It's not important to society or the good of the show or the good of television. It's good to the people. It's to the benefit of the people trying to push it. That's what they want.
I mean, and Nick's point's quite right. I mean, most people have kids. RTD and myself don't. But I find it interesting that he seems to think he knows what kids want and need. And actually, Stephen Moffat, I think, knew more about this. And, you know, he had the Weeping Angels, he had the Silence, he had the Crack in the Wall, Are You My Mummy? Stephen Moffat knew what kids wanted and what scared them, and he was willing to give it to them. Whereas RTD is coming from, yes, he's an uncle, I dare say, and yes, there's kids in his family, just like in mine, but you're not having kids all day. My advantage compared to some people who don't is I was a teacher all day, and because I was head of year, I got to know a lot of their problems. So I did talk to them an awful lot. Still not a parent, though. But RTD seems to think he can somehow, having not worked with kids, not had kids, he can get into their psyche, unlike Dinosaur Brendan and other people. I find it really fascinating. It's strange. To build a whole strategy for a franchise like that is stunning. And then he says the under 16s and the 16 to 34 audience, as well, is massive. It's not doing that well in the ratings, but it's phenomenally well with the younger audience. So I thought, hold on a minute. And he says, you know, they need representation. And then here we go. So children and young people now comprise the majority of the viewers, which is how it should be. The show should be catering to the taste of a younger audience. And you saw some of those before, Gary. Many Doctor Who fans have benefited from their formative years with the Doctor, learnt lessons or seen themselves represented. No. We were all young once, and the Doctor was there for us. Listen, can we just park this? I love Doctor Who. It was my favourite programme, but it's not War and Peace. You know, Doctor Who did not solve my childhood. It was just 25 minutes on a Saturday per week. Let's get this real. Perspective, please. This is the sense sphere. RTD. Doctor Who was not my psychotherapist. It was not my parent, and it was not my teacher. RTD, you're big in the show way beyond its remit, and therefore you're ruining it. Honestly, get a reality check.
Oh, man.
Okay, so I'm gonna. Okay, so in this slide, here's what I would ask Russell. I would go, okay, Russell, explain to me exactly how Rogue caters to the tastes of a younger audience. And I'm not being facetious when I ask that.
No.
I'm taking him at his. I'm taking his statements as they are, because if he thinks the show should be catering to the taste of a younger audience, and this is how Russell T Davies caters to what he thinks the taste is of a younger audience, then he needs serious help.
He does need help. Yeah. And all I would say, if RTD or any of his people ever got to see this panel, RTD, if you think your 45 or 50-minute episodes on a Saturday night are the reason that my kid is so open and accepting and such a beautiful little soul, if you think you are responsible for that with your pushed narrative and agenda, no. It's me and his mother. Yeah. So it's not your responsibility to make my kid well-rounded and accepting. It's me and my wife's responsibility, and I think we're doing a pretty good job. There's just this whole narrative of to go back on it. People need to know. They need to know. No,
Rachel?
parenting, your kid will grow up well balanced.
I'll just say, you never know, Nick. He might actually get that message because Disney and the BBC have a very good relationship with YouTube, I believe. I've heard along the grapevine, let's just put it like this. And I understand that we've had, don't know if it's necessarily been in this stream, but I know that we've had in other streams, like people who work for the BBC and Disney go into those streams and be like undercover, so to speak. So.
Well, I absolutely said that because I absolutely know and believe that they do that, and I've seen it and witnessed it on many other streams.
And we are fair. I have to say, I liked overall the RTD season 1 to 4. Obviously, him coming back makes you look at his era again, and maybe, like they say, don't do that. Anyway, some quick stats because he wants the under 30s, particularly the kiddies. And I'm just showing you a few quick reminders. We've seen some of these before. 16 to 34s, and this was Space Babies, of course. 640,000 watched Doctor Who. Now, that's not bad considering what it's up against regarding all the other 16 to 34s, granted. But that you're not going to build a franchise on that. Then if I show you the audience share of under 16s by season, and even though we'd only had 5 or 6 episodes by this point, it was only 24% of the under 16s were watching Doctor Who, when you can go all the way back to series 1, which we are going to return to, 48% of under 16s. And I know that anecdotally, I was a teacher. I actually rant on about it. And the kid said, I've never heard about Doctor Who. And I said, oh, please. I said, I'm only a teacher, but please watch it on Saturday night. Go on, give it a go. You might love it. And they all came back on Monday and I said, God, that's good. And some of them still write to me now and say, we remember your lessons when you told us to watch Doctor Who. And I'm so glad you did, but we don't watch it now. And anecdotally, it's all there. I don't need many stats really to prove it. And then, of course, we had with Dot and Bubble, the point is 60% of the audience was over 35 even then. The point is, if that's his strategy, as some people in the thread have said, most people who are watching are, well, the average age of Doctor Who is about 61, who's watching, the same age as RTD. Now, I'm going to spend a few minutes just going through the thread because they've been really on fire here, and I think it's only fair. Peter, good stories told, and over the passage of time has the ability to resonate as we grow. The story was always there. We catch up as we grow, if that makes sense. Yeah. Let's have a look. I'm just trying to grab a few here. I think I had David Mullins up before, but yes, you can't cater for everyone, not all the time like this. And if you do, it becomes this kind of diluted, very strange, I don't know, bland thing, like Dot and Bubble. I thought Dot and Bubble looked bland. It looked very beige. It doesn't work. Yes, people should see themselves somewhere, maybe. You know, the human race should be on the screen, but that's it. LGBT are 3% of the population, says Matthew Pounder, purely targeting a minority's commercial suicide. I've said this all along. I've said it in one of my streams, haven't I, on the, there's my slide again. You aim right in the center of the universe is the mass audience who love Doctor Who, and you're firing at little Pluto there in the corner. Why are you doing that? I don't understand that philosophy. I understand his lovely idealism that, we'd like the kiddies to join Doctor Who and stay with it. But he's got to remember that all the ones who've stuck with Doctor Who now, Doctor Who didn't, as we've said, give them a platform.
Does he not think about all the parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles of kids who keep them on board, and perhaps they will share their love with the younger generation?
Yeah.
Don't push them away, because if you push them away, you'll push away all those potential, as much as Jax likes it himself because he's naturally come to it because it's been around the house. We've never forced it on him. If me and Carla were not Whovians, how would he have been exposed to it necessarily to the level he is? So think about, don't push us all away, because if you push us all away, you're doing away potential future generations of fans. Yeah. That's my thought on it.
Gary, I know
I was just going to say really quickly, I don't think that we can. I think it's a mistake to ascribe, altruistic motives to RTD and say, no, he really is being motivated by, a love of the show, and he really does want to bring this amazing show to the youngest audience, and he has all of their best interest at heart. He's just kind of doing it slightly wrong. All he needs to do is kind of clean up a little bit about how he does it, but everything else about him and what he's doing is fine. I cannot disagree with that more. I think that he has his agenda is not altruistic in all this.
Well, I'm not contesting it is. I'm challenging. I'm putting his words up on screen and then challenging. As Melanie Weston Investigates says, come on, if this show is for kids, it's not. Rogue is the perfect example. Dot and Bubble insults 17 to 35-year-olds. Yep. And the Unleashed episode to Dot and Bubble insulted everybody who did not get the message. Yeah. So you're insulting the older ones who are racist. You're insulting the 17 to 35-year-olds who apparently are represented in Dot and Bubble, and you're not aiming at the kids when you've got men trying to kind of cop off in the bushes, showing off over who's got the biggest spaceship. Honestly, that is not a family show. Look, I'm gay, remember, I have to say it, of course, because some people don't even get it, but the point is, I didn't need to see that in Doctor Who. Didn't need to see it. And I've been consistent throughout. Go back to our stream, No Sex in the TARDIS. Since 2005 onwards, the Doctor should not be emotionally compromised. End of.
Deadman in the chat hit it on the head when he said basically the show has no moral center anymore. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, and there was another comment that was much earlier on in the stream that said about asexuals also need representation within storylines.
Yeah.
As
I
well.
mean, if you're going to do the spectrum, I mean, and then stop trying to do a mirror image of planet Earth now and just do some good stories. I mean I think
there's no way this can ever be considered a proper family show again. The comment which I gave the comment I brought up last night about Ruby at the table saying that the reason the guy saying she was not there in bed and she saying it was that was all you, love. I mean, that's not a conversation I won't have to explain to a kid. I will if I have to, but come on, this is a kid's show. What does he mean, Daddy? That question didn't come up, but I can imagine I'd be like, oh, right, great. So go explain this now. Brilliant.
And I'm
aware night. Great.
I'm aware that obviously I don't ever want to look, contrary, as in British pantomime does pitch with adult jokes and the kids also love it. BBC writers seem to be too interested in kids. Well, you may say that. I know. I see the streams and I see the comments. I know. Chibnall and Davies have been writing terrible stories. Agreed. Over the Overseer, Brendan, how do they possibly get these demographic percentages? Well, it's funny because they won't announce certain things and then suddenly they've got things to hand. But remember that comment he made about the under-30s being phenomenally successful, but we haven't actually seen any figures. We've tried to find some, but they've never actually published. I mean, Rachel, you haven't seen anything published actually by them on under-30s, have you? You'd think so. They say it's such a success.
No,
and you think, but I would have thought, it's like politics. We've got the general election, so of course you'd hope that when they say something, they're saying here's the evidence. I know that's not happening, but if I would have thought when you make an argument, you go and here's my evidence. And so when RTD says we've done brilliantly with the under-30s, and there's my evidence.
Yeah,
none.
No, I've not seen anything, and they're not releasing the AI figures this year either. So.
Which is so interesting. David Mullen, this series is not building an audience. No. How many people, David Mullen, have told you, have told me, have told the panel that actually at the end of Empire of Death, that's it. They're going to see it through, see if you get Susan Foreman back or something like that. But and actually that's what we're going to come to next, which is the comparison of finales, as we say. Go on, sorry.
Sorry, just a thought just occurred to me. I've seen people who absolutely love Doctor Who on Twitter and have been enjoying this series, and then at the end they went, "Was that it?
Yeah,
right, I'm done." And they just said, "I'm not watching anymore." And I'm like, "Wow."
Well, there's a certain famous streamer, isn't there? You know the one. There's a certain streamer who seems to be unhappy suddenly. And Beeman here, hello. I have a question. Can they play the new Doctor Who in every country without censorship? I mentioned this the other day.
Wow,
When you look
interesting.
at the Disney figures and you look at where it's still in the top 10, it's done well in Jamaica, then it drops out. Maybe the Ncuti Gatwa Doctor resonates with representation, you don't know. Brazil and Haiti. Not in Eastern Europe. Not in Saudi Arabia and some of the Middle East countries, and I could go on. The Eurovision Song Contest, as we know, is heavily censored in some countries because they just find it an orgy of stuff. And it is getting more sexual. Let's grant that. But no, there's no way Doctor Who, with its liberal messaging, and I've got no problem with a gay kiss on TV, but I've got a problem with the Doctor doing it. That's all. But some countries will not show that, and so basically, when Julie Gardner said we want, with the Disney streaming potential and muscle, we want to reach out to the whole globe, you're never going to, because your messaging is so controversial. So I think the question is, there will be censorship. The censorship of the Eurovision Song Contest, and that's just people dancing. Paul Richards, hello. RTD seems to think we need a highly sexual Doctor. Yes, and this is when people start to say, is he wanting to see himself? I prefer him being an alien outsider whose minds are on bigger things. It's called escapism, isn't it, Paul? It's called escapism. We just want a bit of fun. Now, that was that. Now, Triple Jazz, if my memory serves me right, he's one of our followers who's in Tasmania. So he won't be watching us live, but he likes to send in some things. And he knew we were discussing all the things. Now, if you think of Empire of Death, 3 ideas of why this Doctor Who is a failure. I believe the greatest cause of this dire series was the fact it was written by a drama queen who is in full drama queen modus operandi these days. Hence the soapy-like subplots, the overacting, and an excess of everything we don't want in Doctor Who. The other aspect is the narcissism. Note in many reports of how often RTD uses the pronoun my. And then I've got David Hardin. I'll finish this and then see if Gary, Rachel, or Nick want to come in. David Hardin, separate ones from earlier. More recently, the Chibnall was going to end the show with it being cancelled due to bad ratings before RTD's return. A lot of fans have left the building and aren't coming back. My sense is RTD didn't come back to save the show. This feels like a Hail Mary pass of sorts. The show was on life support and the plug was about to be pulled, so he really doesn't have anything to lose by doing what he's been doing. In the end, if the show still fails, he can say he took his shot. He'll just move on to other projects. So he's not going to change.
There's some points there, aren't there?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
I heard the one about it being cancelled as well, and that it only came back because Disney were going to be funding it. And we know that Disney wants its little mitts on Doctor Who.
Wasn't Chibnall the one who said, like, when they were filming the finale, that they didn't know, like, what was going to come after? I mean, that was basically admission that at the point that episode was being filmed, they all thought that was it.
And RTD has essentially said, that it is on life support, there was, I can't remember the interview, but he was saying, that they've got this funding because so they can make it bigger and they can make it better because it's like some short-lived at the BBC. I don't know what was going on. I can't remember what he said.
Well, wasn't it said last night that there was a theory that RTD, they came back in because the BBC, whoever, used him as a bargaining chip with Disney to get the funding to bring him in. So in which case, to the second point there, my sense is RTD didn't come back to save the show. Well, it's kind of dangerous because you can almost imagine RTD going, well, if you want me back, I want complete free reign. Yeah. I don't want to be challenged. As comments he's made would confirm that that's the case. And that's really dangerous. And so no one's going to challenge him. Oh, we can't challenge RTD. He's part of the deal here. Don't upset RTD.
I also think he wants to write for Disney. So
that's a very good point.
And so if this goes, he goes on to Disney, and Disney are quite happy to take the DEI and run with the message. I mean, you just have to look at what Kathleen Kennedy's done to Star Wars. Now, I'm just a casual viewer, but of Star Wars. But
she's trashed it.
She has. But my review will be up tomorrow of that, so I'm not going to say anything else.
Cannot wait.
There you go. You know what?
I mean,
forgot.
If I could just
RTD got paid up front, and he
Yeah.
probably insisted on that.
Yeah.
That way, if the whole thing died, his check was cashed. He didn't care. And if somehow it worked, then he could angle that into some kind of post-Who producership at Disney, which he absolutely.
Let me just get this in before I forget.
It's too easy now, though, isn't it? Because
can I just get this in?
Sorry, Brendan. Sorry, dude.
Tickled by Bigsby. I need to get this in because yes, we're the end of the season. Where are streams going? And while you've got that there, before I lose you in the thread, controversial classic Doctor Who might be a good idea for a Sense3 episode. A lot of us are talking about what we're going to do next. I've been in negotiation with the biographer of Malcolm Hulke. And we've got a series coming up from the Sea Devils, the Faceless Ones, not to do them as stories, but to look at the politics in Doctor Who, to look at various aspects. So yeah, hopefully that'll kind of sate your appetite a little bit because yes, we've been doing an awful lot of planning, including the RTD in the hot seat and how to build the show again from the position it's in and not being in denial. The show is as it looks today. How could you bail it out? If you could, and we want everybody's imagination running riot. Nick, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to say, sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you there.
Right.
It's too easy now for him, isn't it? Like, he's back because they need him back, and he's got free run. But if it fails, it can't possibly be his fault. It's the fault of the toxic fans.
Of course.
It's not my fault. The fans are toxic. The fans ruined it. And the proof in the pudding there is, let's just look at what's happening with Disney Star Wars, because it's all been played out already, and this is how Doctor Who is going.
Now, this is from Divine and Dragon, and I promised. So we're looking at the finale, and then we're going to go back and knowing what we've just said about Empire of Death, and then shoot back to looking at Chris Eccleston. So he's got theories on where we're going with Doctor Who. So if you want to chip in per slide, but this is his feedback. While he's been on the road and that. So he listens to our webcast. I talk to him quite a lot in email and that. I think he's back now. I tend to think now that RTD was originally brought back by the BBC to salvage the wreckage left by Chibnall. Mm-hmm. I'm of the school of thought, it's just a school of thought, that actually he came back. He was slightly press scanned. I think he was coming back for the specials. I think that's what he said. If you believe him in the Instagram account, I've got the page where he says it, that he was going to do that. Then there were more executives there than he expected. Then he realized if Disney's coming in, it needs somebody who understands Doctor Who. You know, he's the savior of Doctor Who, ego thing. I also have said in one of my saloons recently that actually the negotiation position is the opposite, I think, where the BBC wanted it to be at this point. I think they thought, because the BBC, I really don't think understand Doctor Who, they thought if we get him back over there, he'll save it and we can just leave ourselves, you know, and just get on with earning our money and buying Cornwall. So basically the BBC executives just did what they wanted as usual and just passed it all to him. Hence why he's doing what he wants. The trouble is because he's doing what he wants, and I know you've just said the theory that he might be working on a Disney application form, but there's also the thing which is because he's done his own thing, he's now weakened the franchise so much that the Disney predators can come in and get season 3 for cheaper, but with more control. And so it's an interesting one there. So Chibs, of course, knew how badly Whittaker had been received and prepped the groundwork by returning. And I'll just read a bit of this one and see where you want to pitch on how Divine and Dragon has argued to Tennant to the role of 14th Doctor. He was supposedly doing his successor a favour by setting the stage for the anniversary year. However, the Disney deal was brokered until RTD had been part way through the anniversary specials. True. So just to drive the point home, RTD was planning on the bi-generation leaving Gatwa in the mix, along with the co-present Tennant. Of course, Gatwa couldn't act and Tennant was overused. However, none of that mattered. When the specials were over, RTD would have left these two players on the field for whoever took over. He was kind of forcing the direction of a successor if one was selected, and then he was the successor. This must have been an ego boost and joyous to him. He could push his agenda ever harder, but he'd not made his provisions for Gatwa being unavailable for 2 episodes out of the 8. Furthermore, and there's been articles about him saying he took a risk there. Furthermore, he was saddled with an actor that had no nuance and no range. He'd promised that the Gatwa doctor was baggage-free, but had to push weeping and wailing of the doctor into the mix to mask Gatwa's inability to act. And I'm sorry, I don't want to be reading like hell there. So I'll stop there for a second.
Good.
So he backtracked on the original plan for Gatwa. Similarly, I think he'd been planning an impossible girl arc for Ruby Sunday, but partway through filming, received notes from Disney that Gibson had to go in favour of a new diverse companion. In the end, just as J.J. Abrams set up Rey as special and Rian Johnson revealed she was ordinary to subvert his expectations, Russell decided to write Gibson out with the identical mechanism. He'd call it subverting expectations because it had been done before in Disney, and he says he's followed that. And it goes on for a little bit longer. Does anyone want to come in at this point?
I was laughing at Anthony's Parkinson's comment in the chat, which says, "I wish Gatwa had been unavailable for all 8."
Well, yes, it makes. I mean, 73 yards was halfway there.
I can't argue with the logic. All that just sounds totally logical and totally makes sense. Everything you read.
I mean, I'll just finish it off, and then he's had his argument, and then we can really discuss it and see where we go with it. Because we're talking about the finale, where we are with Doctor Who, and then we'll jump back and see, was it that good with Chris Eccleston anyway? Now, as for the fantasy direction of the series, so much damage was done to the canon by Chibnall, and so many complications were introduced by Disney meddling that only through a fantasy format did Russell feel unencumbered and unrestricted enough to accomplish his goals. The drawback, of course, was that the fantasy moniker and tone destroyed Doctor Who, and it left RTD feeling free to exploit his adolescent fan fiction of Sutekh, attaching himself to the TARDIS, regardless of the illogical and the damage it further applied to canon. And just to finish off, Neely, so it feels like Gatwa Who was a combination of riptide currents that fed the destruction of the property as RTD indulged his worst excesses and impulses. Simultaneously, RTD was tone deaf to the audience and expressing epic levels of hubris. And there, as he finishes off, I've been saying that a modified third Gatwa series was inevitable. Saving face is all that is left for the hacks at the BBC and Disney. The only question is, how many specials will it consist of? Yeah, I know. Yeah. It is unlikely to be a full season, and of course, I still expect a petty fan-attacking finale by RTD. Right. Thank you, Divine and Dragon.
That's an amazing.
That was an amazing
comment.
Really, really good. Well thought out. Well composed. Yeah. I wish I could write that well.
Well, we've got some great followers, and I invite you, get the Gmail, sense3@gmail, and I'll have you up. I'll have you on the panel. You know, I invite people all the time. But, you know, where do you think... Right, so there you go on the finale.
The thing about... one thing I'm going to comment about the fantasy thing, and we've mentioned this before, which is that by him saying that he's leaning into fantasy, basically, to me, that's code for... I don't have to worry about writing a tight script that you know, where there's a cause and effect and a reasoning and a logic behind everything, as in good sci-fi scripts. With fantasy, there's no rules. So I can have pink bunnies fall out of the sky and beat the Daleks if I want to, because it's all fantasy anyway. That allows him to do this kind of shoddy first draft outline filming, which is what I think we got. I can't believe all that stuff that we talked about on the stream yesterday, where he says, "Oh, I stay up till 2 a.m. agonizing over, you know, but bull crap." And if he does, he's focusing on the wrong things.
And that was our show yesterday. Just in reference to what you were saying, there's some killer quotes in there. If you didn't watch our stream, have a look, because there's a section on killer quotes where it's an albatross around his neck. It really is. And that's what Gary was referring to then. Can I just say, when it, sorry, if I put the comment up that I flashed up, I have to flash them up before I lose them. It was about Doctor Who and being magic, as in using magic before with the Tenant Doctor. I think I've lost it now, but that was the point. It's just I can't remember who said it. When you look back at season 1 and you compare to Empire of Death, I do think, unfortunately, we have the same tricks going on. That TARDIS, opening up the TARDIS, and you can absorb all the TARDIS as a human 19-year-old girl, and it doesn't burn your brains out. Whereas the third Doctor, that crystal cave, he had to regenerate. It was just too much. But a 19-year-old girl can take the whole time vortex in her head, not need a paracetamol, and then basically through some sort of kissing mechanism. See, this is magical hocus pocus Doctor Who as RTD does. And so suddenly the time window almost sounds scientific. Absolutely unbelievable. So you have the vortex. And remember, you had the vortex opening up and shutting. Like we've never seen the TARDIS before. It was in Boomtown as well, where you stored the pod and took it back. Remember, RTD had him taking the pod back so she can have her life again and be rehabilitated, but he wouldn't take the space babies to that refugee planet. Couldn't be bothered. But he'd take the right racists to any planet they wanted to colonize. RTD, where you are going with this? But yes, the magic was there, wasn't it, in season 1? The hocus pocus. And I have to say, RTD's invented this new regeneration vapor. And I'm bored with it. I'm sick of it. Every regeneration was different, wasn't it? Didn't you always? I always look forward to a regeneration because you didn't know what it was going to look like. Now you know the TARDIS is going to be.
I still think Tom Baker's regeneration was one of the best. So how cool was that? You know, it's been prepared for, but amazing. You know, what a great regeneration.
He died on AstroTurf.
And now it's just like, oh, I'm going to explode and shoot fire out of every orifice.
Yeah.
Great.
You can do it once. I don't like breaking. I mean, I don't personally like blowing up the TARDIS every time because it starts to get silly.
Yeah.
You know, then it burps and you put your sonic screwdriver in and Wild Blue Yonder and then it reboots. That's never. It's
think back to Patrick Troughton with the whole. I shouldn't do that because my tooth hurts. But and then the face is swirling around and like telling him to pick a face and he's like, he's too old, he's too fat, and you just think. You know, I know it was a forced regeneration, but yeah, every regeneration was different. Now it's just like, oh, he's gonna glow or she's gonna glow.
Yeah. Oh, and but it looks as and therefore it's boring. It's actually boring. The only thing that makes some of them stand out is like, say, Matt Smith's dialogue. That was good, but apart from that, they all look the same. They're tedious and they're a little bit melodramatic and sentimental. Gary, I've got to ask you, Melanie West Investigates says the time window is, as you have said many times, the whole, and you like that aspect. I hated the time window. Again, I thought it was hocus pocus. Ugh.
Well, I mean, that just shows that's just another in the string of RTD's ripoffs. Oh, sorry, homages. You know, this season to other sources. Like you said, I mean, in the back of my mind, I'm still kind of going through this season's stuff, like on the chart that you put up, and trying to identify one truly original concept of anything, characters, plots, settings, aliens, whatever, that we couldn't trace back as like a direct lift from something else.
You see,
I don't think you're going to find one that's completely original, dude.
Yeah, I said it in my Emperor of Death review that the Angels of Death, all they reminded me of was that Siths and Jedis, you know, with the costume and like their powers and what they were doing. That was all making me think, oh my goodness, this is Star Wars, you know. And then there was a shot that you had on the screen before with Mel and Ncuti and Millie, and I thought in my head, beam me up, Scotty. You know?
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely.
What's going to happen?
To what you said earlier about, just to jump back a little bit, but to come back to where we are, about is this a thing for RTD to get in the good books of Disney to get a job? There's no way anyone with any logical brain thinks that, oh, I'm going to copy Star Wars and do the Rian Johnson thing because he annoyed every fan, so they had to pull back J.J. Abrams again, who didn't do a good job in the first place. And then all this ripping off and all this taking from Disney, I think your theory is absolutely sound. He's not original. He's going to rip everything off, but he's going to take all these little hints and things from Disney because he really wants a seat at the mouse's table, doesn't he? That's what he wants.
He'd love to. I think he'd like to get his hands on Star Wars.
And I hope he never does, but he probably will.
Yeah, I should say that I don't have the mental strength to go and rewatch the episodes from this season again. I think my brain would crack probably about an hour in. But here's the thing, and we've talked about the fact that a lot of the stuff that was set up early and all throughout the season, which was never answered, the fact that Ruby could make it snow, the fact that Jinx Monsoon, was scared and alluded to that Ruby was more than human, whatever. All these illusions which made it seem like it was building up, that Ruby was going to be more than human. There was something, and all of a sudden at the end, all that was abandoned with no answers and no connecting it up. And all of a sudden, Russell T Davies at 2 a.m. or whatever decided, maybe he got done watching The Last Jedi at home, and he said, you know what, that's going to be my ending instead. I don't care that it doesn't fit. So there is that element of, was he originally building up to something different, and at the end, for whatever reason, defaulted to a Star Wars ripoff?
There is one other thought to that. I mean, because Rian Johnson basically, it's implied in The Force Awakens, Rey's special. Do you know what? I'm supposed to be a Star Wars fan. I can't even remember the name of the second film. It was that terrible. Anyway, Rian Johnson says, one's special. And then it comes back to the third film. Oh, you're the granddaughter or great granddaughter of Palpatine, whatever. You don't think RTD's gone, well, I'm going to tell everyone that she's no one special, and tell them that she's basically leaving, and then we're going to bring her back in the next series, and it turns out that she is someone spectacular. Because if he did that, that would really
he said it
be
in
ripping
link,
off Disney.
He said it in the video commentary that was his inspiration, and he wanted to do it right. Can I just bring in the bi-generation, because I've made mention the regeneration vapes, and to be honest, this was the start of Shooty, and this was the kind of disconnect, as you saw. It's my argument. You saw my thumbnail for today, and I didn't just do it just to be controversial or anything. I did start to think. Sorry, it was the one for the last one, and I had them breaking up. That classic Who and New Who as was is breaking away and possibly going in a different direction via this bi-generation. Now, I've just read out Divine and Dragon's arguments. Now, Sally here, good to see you. Bi-regeneration was one of the worst things that ever happened with this latest abomination, still calling itself Doctor Who. There's just a couple more, and then I want to ask the panel. I want to ask you, why do you think he did the bi-generation? Because it didn't have, you were saying about time windows and the snow and everything, Gary, it didn't get explained. So I'm assuming there is no explanation. So he just did it as a bit of fun. Tickled by Bigsby. Bi-regeneration, it felt like, let's keep the popular Doctor around if the gay black one doesn't work out, kind of thing. And there is a theory to that, except, as you know, we've all said it, in Empire of Death, there was a Doctor and there was another TARDIS available, but he decided he wanted another cocktail with Donna. Or was he dust at that point? I mean, honestly, none of it was excellent. Do you know what? He was never even referenced, was he really? He was referenced in Legend of Ruby Sunday when, Rose, I think, said he's all right or something, and that was it. But not another word. He didn't pop around to check he was all right. Nothing. So what's your theories on why he even bothered to do the bi-generation? Why?
I think there's I think there could possibly be something to, if we split them apart, if it goes horribly wrong, we can erase this incarnation and go back to the previous one. It wouldn't surprise. I mean, with everything Disney's done with Star Wars, nothing would surprise me. But then actually that, to contradict myself and that, Disney are pretty good at doubling down, as is RTD. They don't seem to want to admit mistakes or...
I mean, Gary, there's the other thing that I was looking at top quotes for the Shooty Doctor, and I had to go searching on online to see if anyone had listed any, because I couldn't think of any really. And one of them was actually linked to him bi-generating from David Tennant, but it was a David Tennant quote. So the 14th Doctor obviously didn't hang around for long. So one of his quotes that some fans talk about is when they were uncoupling, he was saying to the companions, can you pull? And everybody's read sexually into all this, that you've got two men homoerotically, you know, grinding their groins together, and we need to pull them. And are we right as fans thinking the bi-generation was a bit of, I don't know, was a little bit of kind of sexual joke? On top of that, there were sexual jokes within the dialogue. And the undies, why did he do it?
I mean, as far as any sexual component, I mean, like I said, look at the unfortunate placement of the special effect in the top left picture. But I think that, I mean, you think about the My Generation, RTD couldn't even get straight as to what happened, because in the giggle, it's almost made explicit that this is a future doctor that the toy maker had pulled back through time to that point, and then they split apart. But then in a subsequent episode, I'm not sure which one, I think it was one of the later ones, the dialogue Ncuti says is, I've been split in two. I'm like half a person. It's like, no, that's not what was explained in the giggle. And the other thing that's coming up with RTD having all that complete insanity about this is what has happened to, you know, every doctor ever. And in that, I'll throw the whole thing about this season's all about the pantheon of gods and the fact that the things in Dot and Bubble will call man traps. All of that was done in the unhinged after show or whatever it's called. That to me doesn't count. If it's not important to you as the writer to actually put it in the actual episode, then explaining it all in an after show and then saying, oh, but this is it, this is what it is. No, it's not what it is, because that's just an after show. As far as my last thing I'll say is, as my speculation about possibly one of the reasons why this was done, as far as the kind of insurance in case Ncuti flopped, I think it was only weeks later that RTD was proclaiming David Tennant's never coming back. He's off somewhere, you know, mowing grass or fallen into a hole or something, which seems to put paid to the idea that he's still around as insurance, I think. And I think that maybe RTD didn't want to get into the, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, he didn't want to get into the uncomfortable visual area of having a white doctor metamorphose into a black doctor. Like a regular regeneration where he's there lying on the ground or whatever, all of a sudden then, you know, he's a white man and now we see the change into a black man. I don't think RTD wanted to depict that visually, and what we got in the bi-generation was really all that he could do.
So as I come to Rachael, Peter Harrington reminds us of Inferno, or was it the Three Doctors? I don't remember in the Three Doctors. A scene of the third Doctor being pulled apart, his face really. I mean, Sally, you made me laugh. I've got to put it up. The regeneration has now been axed. We'll no longer see one doctor change into another the proper traditional way. Now they'll just come out of each other's backside. I mean, it's starting to get silly, but as I come to Rachael, the bi-generation was to emasculate Tennant, and yet we were also bothered about not emasculating him when he changed from Jodie's costume to his. Remember, that was a strange regeneration because he had his clothes on, and then when he regenerates into Ncuti, clothes come off again. Very strange. And I just want to make sure I've not left anyone out. Divine and Dragon. Well, the rules supporting regeneration have been so muddled, there is no way to course correct anymore. You see, canon has been wrecked. It's been changed. I noticed Lord Thoth just said a nice jukebox because he's not going to go there and look at all the rest. What's in the shot? Rachael, what's your theory?
Am I on?
Yep.
Ah, brilliant. My theory about what's going on here. I was listening to everything that you were saying, so I was just, I don't know. I theorized that this was obviously due to needing to do a backup, but there's also this possibility that if it is going to go to Disney like things like multiverses and things like that, don't they?
Yeah.
So they want to set up a multiverse, so they called it a Hooniverse, and this is my theory as to why it perhaps came about. I don't think it was a good idea. I think making it about regeneration isn't a great idea overall, because I know that's what they want to do, and I actually think this it whether you like him or not, I've said it before, it just dumped all over Ncuti, and that was really unfair. It also dumped over David Tennant as well, because it was no clean break, it was no fresh start. I would have liked it to have actually been just like clean, done, regeneration, one and done, but it seems like they want to go down the route of making regeneration, excuse me, a big deal, and it's a great plot device, but it was only brought in because William Hartnell wasn't well enough to continue.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, and even Pat Troughton thought it was stupid. So, that's...
And you didn't see Troughton regenerate either, which is the weak spot in canon, because, of course, you know the theory. Melanie Weston Investigates has a question for you all. Do you think Russell Davies did not want to do the regeneration with Jodie and Ncuti and wanted Tennant to bridge instead?
No, I think that was a filming clash.
Okay.
Wasn't Ncuti like unavailable for like a year because he was doing Sex Education and then Barbie, and they had to come up with something to give them something to film while he was off doing the other stuff? Wasn't that it?
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
I think it was I don't think it was a thought out master plan. It was a practical decision.
They already knew he was doing it.
Now, before we just dive into our last bits of Chris Eccleston and the finale there, I just want to ask you about Ncuti Gatwa. I did look up, and please, in the thread, can you tell me any great speeches or quotes that you've seen in season 1 by the 15th Doctor? Because that was one of the criticisms of Chibnall and Jodie's Doctor. The only ones I could find, now get this, the 15th Doctor did say, "You can't save everyone." He also said... Oh, sorry. And you see, Donna, when they bi-generated, she said, "Do you come in a range of colours?" Now, I know I've got a sense of humour, but I wouldn't have written that, I have to say. But the 15th Doctor also said, one thing you need in this place, and that was Tennant's new TARDIS, was a chair. I mean, this is the level of nonsense. Where's the speeches? Where's the big moments for the Ncuti Gatwa Doctor before we mention great speeches maybe by the Eccleston Doctor?
You need a chair, because, Sylvester McCoy didn't have chairs in the TV movie, did he, at the start of the film? He's just moved them. There's chairs.
It's a very strange thing.
It's an odd thing to say. It's just such a bizarre thing to say, you need a chair.
I know doctors slag off each other's TARDISes, obviously. You've redecorated. I don't like it. I know that bit, but it's just a very strange one. So on the Eccleston front, does everybody on the thread want to feel a bit good about themselves, or basically slag it off as well? It's allowed. I mean, I've slagged off this, and if Hugh was on, and I am representing Hugh as well here, Hugh just can't stand all this nonsense at the end with the time vortex, the kiss. So unsatisfactory as a reset, and I was disappointed. I mean, yes, it was a fan's dream to see all those millions of Daleks realized.
What specifically doesn't Hugh like about this?
I think it is a reset. It's just a whole lot of hocus pocus. We've never heard that if you just lift the lid. I mean, the TARDIS is not a car bonnet where you just lift it up and there's a vortex just kind of dancing around. We know that the time rotor links further down and above. We know that's been kind of mentioned. But honestly, you just lift the lid and, as well as finding a spanner, you find the whole vortex. I mean, it's a bit dangerous, actually. Should you have goggles or something? No, it's a load of hocus pocus. And it showed us how RTD will just have the chutzpah to absolutely just make up gobbledygook.
Yep.
And just let it fly. And I'm sorry, Hugh. I know I think he's in Paris at the moment. Very nice.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, no. Well done. But I think it's that kind of thing. Hugh can't stand the bad wolf repetition. It's not a series arc. He said it's just repetition of you know, an item, and he can't stand that kind of quick reset. I hated more than even the vortex the fact that with all this kissy stuff, you know, I'll take it back off you. Or if she's riddled with a time vortex, and when he's got it in him, he has to regenerate, but she will be all right, Jack. What? Because he sucked it back through a kiss. What a blooming kiss that was. So, but then the other thing was, I didn't like the fact that it just evaporated every Dalek. Absolutely hate it. And then the hocus pocus that suddenly Captain Jack was alive again, and that was handy because we could do a face of both. Honestly, I lost it. Yeah.
Well, because RTD is not really writing science fiction; he's writing science fantasy. It's kind of Star Wars-esque in its lack of rules and limits and defined parameters of what the world looks like.